So how can your tenants having another baby actually benefit? I've spoken a lot about getting creative in commercial real estate, and today I want to talk about how you can get creative in residential real estate. In particular, how I turned a situation where a tenant wanted to leave into a situation where I actually benefited because I increased my cash flow and my net worth. As I said, let's talk about how to get creative with residential real estate. In fact, towards the end of this video, I'm going to give you 3 hacks that you can deploy to massively increase the value of any residential property. And before we get started, let's talk about how we define residential real estate. And again, Investopedia says that residential real estate is any property used for residential purposes. Examples include single-family homes, condos, cooperatives, duplexes, townhouses, and multifamily residences with fewer than 5 individual units. Well, I want to be very clear here. In my books, a residential property is anything that people use as a residence. So even if it's a multifamily with 5 units, or 15, or 20, or 300, it is still residential property because people still live there, and you're still subject to the rules and regulations of the residential tenancy agreement. One of the differences that I've always talked about between residential property and commercial property is that commercial property is very contract-centric, whereas residential property is very people-centric. And as such, your ability to communicate determines your success in residential property because you're dealing with people all the time. The better your ability to get through to them, to understand what their needs are and to deliver on those needs, and for them to understand what you need, the more success you'll have with residential property. Let me illustrate with a simple example. I once had a tenant who'd been a very good tenant for about 7 years, always paid the rent on time, kept the place in immaculate condition. And he came to me one day and said, "Dolf, sorry, I'm not going to renew the agreement this time." And I said, as one might expect, I said, "Well, I understand. That's okay. Thank you for being such a great tenant. In fact, if you want a reference, I'd be more than happy to furnish one." But I added one thing, and this is that part of communication that I'm trying to share. I added one question. I said, "If you don't mind me asking, why are you leaving?" Now, there could have been many reasons. They might have gotten another job in another city, or they might have been emigrating to another country. But he said, "Well, my wife is pregnant again, and while we've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house here, we really need 4 bedrooms. So I thought, he needs an extra bedroom. So I asked him, if I were to build you an extra bedroom, would you be willing to pay the extra rental based on a 4-bedroom house? And he said, "Well, of course I would. In fact, it would be great because it would save me moving the schools of the other kids, like having the kids go to a new school. It means we wouldn't need the relocation expenses and all the rigmarole that goes with shifting house. But would you do that for me?" And here are the numbers that I'm going to share with you to see if it's a good deal. At the time, he was paying $1,400 in rent a month for his 3-bedroom home. And the market rental for a 4-bedroom home was $1,800 a month. So I said, "Would you be willing to pay $1,800 a month?" And he said, "Yes." Well, that's an extra $400 a month, which over the course of a year is an extra $4,800. The only question I needed to ask at this stage was, how much money could I borrow with $4,800? And at a ridiculously high interest rate of 10%, obviously I could borrow $48,000. So I can borrow $48,000 and have it serviced by the extra rental. The question now becomes, can I build an extra bedroom for less than $48,000? And the answer was yes. It came in at $33,000. So by building this bedroom for $33,000, my cash flow went up because I was getting the extra rental more than the cost of servicing the loan on $33,000. My collateral went up. My equity went up. The property value went up. And most importantly, my tenant appreciation went up. Can you imagine him talking with his mates at work saying, "Oh my gosh, I told my landlord I had to leave." And he asked me why. And I said, "I've got an extra kid coming along." And he said, "Well, what if I build you the extra bedroom? If you're ever going to rent a property, rent it from Dolf. He looks after you." Now, this example with the extra bedroom obviously is a bit unique. It won't happen a lot of the time. What's something that you could do to just about any property, especially if it doesn't already have a garage or a carport? And here's the situation. For most people, especially those that rent the home they live in, their biggest asset is their motor car. And if they have to leave it out in the sun and the sleet and the rain and the snow, that's not nearly as good as when there is a carport. Now, I can build a carport any day of the week for about $1,000. It's one post in each corner with a bit of a roof on it with a slope. Why a slope? So that when it rains, the rain can fall off. If you're really cheap, you can get away with 3 posts. They stay standing. And more seriously, you can cantilever the carport so that you've only got 2 posts in the rear and you never have to worry about damaging the car driving in. But by building a carport for $1,000, the value of that property goes up by about $10,000, and it becomes easier to rent because the tenants love not having their car in the sun and the rain and the sleet. So this is a simple thing that you can do with just about any property. Build a carport for $1,000 and it goes up by $10,000. But would you like to know how to make it even more lucrative than that? So we said that the carport cost about $1,000 to build and that the value of the house went up by $10,000. And anywhere in the world, you can easily get an extra $80 a month by having a carport there. Well, over the course of the year, that's almost $1,000 a year. In other words, you can build a carport for $1,000 and collect an extra $1,000 in rent. That's an extra 100% return on your money for that $1,000 that you're spending. But here's a way of making it even better. Imagine you go to the bank and say, Mr. Bank Manager, I've got a new appraisal for this property. It's gone up by $10,000. Will you lend me a modest 70% of that? And he's going to say yes, because they lend money on real estate, remember. So now you've got $7,000 cash. Remember, it's not earned income. There's no income tax on it. There's not the sale of anything. There's no capital gains tax. And you use $1,000 of that $7,000 to pay off the $1,000 you spent building it. So now it's cost you nothing. You've got $6,000 in your pocket. Even if you're paying 10% interest on that $7,000, that's only $700. You've still got $300 net coming in because the tenant's paying you $1,000 a year more. So you have a choice when you build a carport. You can pay $1,000 cash and get $1,000 a year, or you can pay no cash and get $300 a year, indexed for inflation. It's going to go up every year. Why would you not do this? And as a third example, imagine you have a house that has no fence, or it's a fence made of that cyclone mesh wiring that you can see through and the wind blows through and the litter blows through. The cost of building a fence is relatively modest. However, the extra value to this house of having the fence there and giving the occupants some privacy is almost priceless. It will certainly be easier to find a tenant with the fence in place. So I've just given you 3 ideas of using your creativity to massively increase the value of a property. But don't for a moment think that you're limited to those 3 ideas. In fact, I always say there are 101 ways of massively increasing the value of your real estate without spending much money. And someone who always puts his money where his mouth is, I wrote the book on it. It's the longest title on Amazon. It literally has got 101 ways of massively increasing the value of your real estate without spending much money. And by the way, let me ask you, do you think it was easy to come up with 101 ideas? No, it wasn't. It was tough. It was tough to limit it to 101 ways because there are so many more. And we're just re-releasing this book, a new edition of this book, along with Chris, to show you ideas as to what you can do that you probably haven't thought of. And that's why a book like this is so valuable, because it lets your creative juices flow. Remember to get a copy of this book. Click the link below. We are giving it to you free because we want you to be successful. We want you to be creative. And real estate is one of the best vehicles for letting your creativity run rife. I always say the most valuable piece of real estate is the 6 inches, give or take an inch or 2, between your right ear and your left ear, because it's what you create in that space that ultimately will determine your net worth. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe. We talked a lot today about residential real estate and how you can be creative in that space. We all know that the pandemic has affected us in many different ways, but in fact, it's affected us in residential and commercial differently. And I just completed a video explaining the effect of the pandemic on those 2 sectors of real estate. Check it out. Hope to see you on the next video.